She smirked. "You'll never leave me. You need me too much." I just nodded. The expression on her face when she opened the envelope on our kitchen table the next morning. My name is Nate, and for the past 3 years, I had been living with a woman who thrived on control. Her name was Vanessa, and from the outside looking in, most people thought she was the one doing me a favor by being with me. She had that kind of magnetic presence that could charm strangers in an instant, the type that made people believe she was graceful, successful, and destined for bigger things. What they didn't see was the rot underneath. I learned early on that Vanessa loved control more than love itself. Everything in our relationship was defined on her terms. If we went out to dinner, she picked the restaurant, the time, and even the table. If we watched a movie, she mocked any suggestion I made until I gave in to her choice. Vacations? She chose destinations that photographed well, not places either of us actually wanted to visit. I once suggested a road trip to see the mountains, something cheap and simple, but she laughed at me as though the idea itself was beneath her. Her favorite tactic wasn't screaming or fighting, it was belittling. She'd smile sweetly while cutting deep. At gatherings, she'd nudge me with a grin and say, "Oh, Nate doesn't really handle money well. That's why I manage everything." Guests would laugh, thinking it was a harmless joke, while I stood there, holding back the frustration. She chipped away piece by piece, making sure everyone saw me as less capable, less independent, and somehow dependent on her brilliance. And the worst part? For a while, I let it happen. I convinced myself it was just her personality, that maybe I really did need her organization, her confidence, her so-called direction. But over time, something inside me began to sharpen instead of crumble. Each smirk, each condescending jab, each moment she reminded me I needed her carved a mark inside me. I didn't break, I planned. The turning point came one night when I caught her slipping. We had a joint account, and though she insisted she handled all the finances, I had quietly kept access. She had no idea I still checked it every few days. One evening, while she was out with her friends, I saw transfers, small at first, then larger, dripping into an account under her name only. It wasn't household bills. It wasn't savings for us. She was stockpiling money behind my back. When she got home that night, tipsy and smug, she walked past me without even a glance. I sat at the table, staring at her purse, knowing exactly what was inside. Receipts, cards, maybe even evidence I could use. For the first time, I realized just how deep her arrogance ran. Vanessa wasn't planning for us. She was planning for herself. And if she ever decided to leave, I'd be the fool left with nothing. That realization snapped something awake inside me. From that night, I began laying the groundwork. I didn't confront her, not yet. That would have been foolish. Vanessa thrived on drama, and if I accused her outright, she'd twist the narrative until I was the insecure one, the paranoid boyfriend who couldn't handle a strong woman. No, I stayed quiet, outwardly nodding, laughing at her little jokes, agreeing when she called me hopeless in front of others. Every nod, every smile, was a mask while underneath, I was moving pieces into place. I started with the basics. I opened a new account she didn't know about and rerouted part of my paycheck into it. Slowly, week by week, the balance grew. I cut back on expenses she didn't track. Lunches, gas, small purchases she assumed were trivial. She never noticed. In her mind, I was predictable, tame, and harmless. She believed I was too weak to ever act on my own. At the same time, I began documenting. Every transfer she made, every strange purchase, every late-night work event she attended that didn't match her company's schedule, I kept a record. I even printed statements and stored them in a folder at my office. Vanessa prided herself on being clever, but she left digital fingerprints everywhere. It wasn't long before I had enough evidence to show that she wasn't just manipulative. She was funneling money and hiding things deliberately. The more I learned, the more I realized she wasn't planning a future with me at all. She was keeping me around as a placeholder until something better came along. That was Vanessa's game. Keep me in her grip, keep me believing I couldn't live without her, while she slowly built her own escape. I stopped asking questions. I stopped suggesting anything. Instead, I gave her silence, which she mistook for compliance. She smirked more, grew bolder with her remarks, and one night, after a small argument about nothing, me forgetting to pick up dry cleaning, of all things, she leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and said the words that burned into my mind. "You'll never leave me, Nate. You need me too much." I looked right at her, and I nodded. Not because I believed it, but because that was the exact confirmation I needed. She had no idea what was coming. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table in the dark with nothing but the glow of my laptop. My hands shook slightly as I prepared what I had been working toward for weeks. The documents were ready. The account transfers, The notarized paperwork I'd signed with a lawyer earlier that week. The letter I wrote in clear, steady words. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was precise. I sealed it all in a large envelope and placed it carefully on the kitchen table. A quiet declaration of independence. A silent detonation waiting to go off. Before I left for work in the morning, I glanced at her still sleeping, wrapped in blankets like a queen in her castle, utterly convinced of her power over me. I didn't say anything. I didn't touch her. I just walked out, knowing that when she opened her eyes and walked into the kitchen, she'd finally see that the leash she thought she had around my neck had already snapped. And when she saw what was inside that envelope, everything she thought she controlled would begin to collapse. When Vanessa finally woke up the next morning, I wasn't there to see it. I was at work, acting like it was any other day. I made my coffee, clocked in, sat through meetings, all while knowing the storm was brewing back at the apartment. Around 9:15 a.m., my phone buzzed, and the screen lit up with her name. I didn't answer. The call ended. 10 seconds later, she called again. Still, I let it ring. She left a voicemail, but I didn't listen. I already knew the tone. Sharp, shrill, panicked beneath a layer of rage. The envelope had done its job. Inside, she had found more than just a goodbye. She found a carefully curated packet of her own actions staring back at her. Bank statements with highlighted transfers, receipts that didn't match the stories she'd told me, copies of her late-night emails, even a few photos I'd taken discreetly when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Alongside all of that was the letter. In it, I explained everything in a steady, clear voice, that I knew what she had been doing, that I was removing myself from her game, and that I had already taken steps to protect my finances and my life. There was no dramatic accusation, no begging her to explain, just a list of what I knew, what I had already done, and what I would no longer allow. The final page was the real knife. Copies of legal paperwork showing I had severed all joint accounts, removed her as a beneficiary on anything tied to me, and, most humiliating of all for someone who thrived on control, evidence that her own parents had received the same documents the night before. Because yes, I mailed them a copy. That part was calculated. I knew Vanessa relied on her parents for backup whenever she wanted to play the victim. They believed every word she said, bought her stories of being the strong woman, stuck with a man who couldn't keep up. They gave her money when she overspent, vouched for her when she exaggerated, and let her bask in the glow of their approval. So when they opened their envelope, containing every piece of evidence she had been siphoning funds, manipulating accounts, and lying, they would see her differently. The first voicemail confirmed it. Her voice cracked as she spat words between choked breaths, cursing me, calling me a coward for leaving papers instead of facing her. She switched tones mid-sentence, pleading for me to come home, to talk it out, insisting it was all misunderstood. Then, back to venom again, threatening she would ruin me socially if I didn't pick up. I didn't. By lunch, she had sent a string of messages. Some were desperate apologies, others were vicious attacks. She even claimed she'd call my boss, tell him I was unstable, make me lose my job. I just scrolled, shook my head, and muted the thread. She was unraveling faster than I thought. Around 3 p.m., a mutual friend, one of the few she hadn't alienated with her arrogance, texted me privately. Vanessa showed up at her parents' place. It got loud. Something about money, accounts. What's going on? That was when I knew the second stage had kicked in. Her safety net was gone. Later that night, when I finally walked back into the apartment, the place looked like a storm had blown through. Papers were scattered across the floor, one of my shirts had been ripped in half, and a wine glass lay shattered by the sink. Vanessa was sitting at the table, eyes red, her hair a tangled mess. When she saw me, she didn't scream. She laughed. A hollow, cracked sound. "You think you're clever, Nate? You think you can humiliate me like this?" she asked. I didn't answer. I walked past her, opened the bedroom door, and began packing. She followed me, her voice rising. "You won't survive without me. You don't even know how to manage your life. What? You think this little stunt makes you powerful? You're pathetic." Her words slid off me like water off stone. For the first time in years, I felt immune. She could call me weak, but she had no clue how much strength it had taken to plan this, to stay silent while she flaunted her arrogance, to play along while quietly cutting the strings. I zipped my suitcase, lifted it off the bed, and brushed past her. She shoved me once, hard against the wall, but I kept moving. She screamed again, this time so loud the neighbors would have heard. I didn't stop. The door closed behind me, and the echo of her voice faded with every step I took down the hallway. That night, I stayed in a hotel. By morning, she had tried calling me 17 times. She left messages alternating between begging me to come back and threatening that she'd destroy me. I ignored every single one. The real breaking point came 2 days later. Vanessa's parents called me directly. Her father's voice was low, deliberate, filled with something I had never heard before, shame. He apologized, actually apologized, for believing Vanessa's stories for so long. He said they had confronted her with the documents I sent, and she exploded, screaming and lying until finally breaking down. They told me they were cutting her off financially, that they wouldn't cover her expenses anymore, and that she'd need to live with the consequences of her actions. I thanked him, though I kept my guard up. I didn't trust anyone tied to Vanessa, but hearing that even her parents had drawn a line, that was something I hadn't expected so soon. Meanwhile, Vanessa spiraled. Without her parents' support, she turned to friends. I started getting texts from people who asked why she was saying I stole money from her, why she was crying on their couches, spinning tales of betrayal. I stayed calm and sent each of them the same reply. Check your email. Because yes, I had prepared for that too. The night I mailed her parents, I also sent packets to a small circle of people who knew us well. Nothing dramatic, just the facts. The transfers, the receipts, the evidence. I didn't embellish. I didn't even add commentary. Just the raw truth. By the end of the week, the narrative had flipped. Instead of being the poor woman left behind, Vanessa became the manipulative partner who got caught. And yet, even cornered, she didn't stop fighting. One Friday night, I was leaving the office when I saw her waiting by my car. Her eyes were swollen, her voice low but sharp. She said I had destroyed her life, that I had turned everyone against her. She leaned closer, her hand gripping my jacket like claws, and whispered that I would regret making her look weak. I didn't react. I unlocked the car, got in, and drove away while she pounded on the hood screaming my name. By the time I got home, I knew something important. She wasn't done. Vanessa was wounded, but she wasn't finished. She would come after me in whatever way she could. What I didn't realize yet was how far she was willing to go, and who else she would drag into the fallout. The week after the envelope incident was the loudest silence of my life. I wasn't living with Vanessa anymore, but her presence followed me everywhere like smoke that clung to my clothes. I could feel her watching me from a distance, even if I couldn't see her. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected it to be her. Sometimes it was. More often, it was someone she had gotten to first. At first, she tried the desperate route. Tearful voicemails, emails begging for a second chance, long texts where she claimed she had just been scared and didn't mean to hurt me. I didn't reply. That's when she shifted gears. Suddenly, I became the villain. She told anyone who would listen that I had stolen money from her, manipulated her accounts, and fabricated evidence to smear her. She said I had a temper, that I had isolated her, that she had been afraid of me. She played the victim so convincingly that for a moment, even I felt the old tug of doubt. But the thing about Vanessa was that she couldn't maintain one story for long. Her lies had a way of tripping over each other. One evening, I met with a mutual friend, Lauren, who wanted to hear my side before cutting me off completely. I brought the folder I kept with me, laid out the documents on the cafe table, and let the silence speak louder than any defense I could give. Lauren looked at the highlighted transfers, the receipts, the timeline of Vanessa's spending compared to her stories. Her expression shifted from suspicion to horror. She said you locked her out of the accounts, Lauren whispered. I nodded. Because she drained them. That night, word spread faster than Vanessa could keep up. Friends who had been sympathetic began pulling away. But Vanessa wasn't done. When manipulation didn't work with friends, she went nuclear. The following Monday, I was called into HR at work. My stomach dropped as soon as I saw the letter on the desk. An anonymous complaint had been filed against me. The accusations were vague but poisonous, claims of aggressive behavior and intimidation tactics. It didn't take a genius to trace it back to Vanessa. I sat through the meeting calmly, producing the documentation I had kept, even emails where she had threatened to ruin me. HR closed the matter quietly, but the warning was clear. She was willing to scorch the earth if it meant taking me down with her. It should have scared me. Instead, it steeled me. Because buried in all her noise, she made her first real mistake. In one of her emails, she let something slip. She had written, in a fit of anger, "You think you're better than him? You think you'll come out of this on top?" Him. At first, I assumed she meant one of my friends or her father. But then I dug deeper. I started cross-referencing dates, times she said she was at work events, late nights she brushed off as networking, weekends she claimed she was exhausted from overtime. Patterns emerged. I remembered a conversation weeks before when she had mentioned her boss, casually slipping in his name, Trevor. She had laughed about how he was a little too friendly with women in the office, but framed it as gossip. Looking back, it had been a test balloon. I didn't confront her directly. Instead, I made a call to someone I knew in her office. They hesitated, but when I mentioned I had evidence of Vanessa funneling money, the dam broke. What they told me confirmed everything. Vanessa wasn't just controlling me behind the scenes. She was sleeping with Trevor, a married man with 2 kids. The work events, the networking dinners, the sudden influx of expensive gifts she claimed were bargains, all of it traced back to him. For a moment, I just sat in silence, absorbing it. It wasn't even shocking, not really. It was just the final missing piece. The affair itself didn't ruin me, but what it represented did. Vanessa hadn't only been preparing her escape financially. She was securing it romantically too. She had been using me as a fallback while cozying up to someone she thought could offer her more. And here's where the karma came in. Trevor's wife, Sandra, had no idea. At least, not yet. That week, I printed another folder, clean, precise, undeniable. Screenshots of Vanessa's late-night texts, the bank records that showed purchases aligning with their supposed business trips, even photos of them leaving a restaurant together when she thought I was at work. I didn't dump it online. I didn't spread it to the world. I sent one single package. To Sandra. The aftermath was immediate. 2 days later, Vanessa blew up my phone in a frenzy unlike anything I'd seen before. 36 missed calls. Long messages where she screamed in all caps about how I had destroyed her career and ruined her relationship. She claimed Trevor's wife had confronted him at his office, that there had been a scene, that his position was now at risk. And with his downfall came hers. Vanessa's reputation at work crumbled overnight. Trevor distanced himself publicly, insisting she had manipulated him, though I'm sure the truth was more complicated. Either way, she was left exposed. Colleagues whispered, her projects were reassigned, and within weeks she was placed on temporary leave. The woman who once smirked and told me I could never leave her now had no job, no parental support, no backup plan. But Vanessa was nothing if not desperate. Late one night, she showed up at the hotel where I was staying. She looked hollow, her once perfect image cracked. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes swollen, her voice hoarse from crying or screaming. I couldn't tell which. She pushed past me into the room before I could stop her. "You think you won?" she hissed. "You think this makes you strong? You've ruined everything, Nate. My parents hate me, my friends turned their backs, Trevor won't even speak to me. You think you're free? You're not. You'll never be free of me." I stood there, silent, letting her rant. She wanted a reaction, any spark she could use to reignite the old dynamic. But I gave her nothing. Finally, she pulled something from her bag and threw it at me. A stack of unpaid bills, all under her name. Rent, credit cards, loans she had hidden. "This is what you've done. This is what you left me with. You'll regret it when they come after me. You'll regret it when I take you down with me." I picked up the stack, glanced at the numbers, and placed them back on the table. "Not my name. Not my problem," I said quietly. She stared at me, stunned by the flatness in my tone. For the first time, I saw the cracks in her armor. The smirk was gone. The arrogance was gone. All that remained was a woman cornered by her own lies. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. As the echo faded, I sat on the bed and realized the strangest truth. I hadn't lifted a finger to hurt her. I hadn't lied, fabricated, or schemed beyond documenting the truth. Everything Vanessa suffered came from the weight of her own actions, her own arrogance. And still, I knew she wasn't done. People like Vanessa never stopped until the final curtain fell. After Vanessa stormed out of the hotel that night, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled, I sat in silence. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. Instead, I felt something that almost startled me. Calm. It wasn't triumph, and it wasn't relief either. It was the realization that I had nothing left to lose when it came to her. For 3 years, she had drained me of self-respect, manipulated every corner of my life, and smirked as though I was her puppet. Now the strings were severed, and the puppet had walked off stage. But the story didn't end there. Over the next few weeks, Vanessa's unraveling accelerated like a car rolling downhill without brakes. She tried to get her job back, appealing to HR with sob stories about harassment and victimization. It didn't work. Too many coworkers had seen the affair with Trevor. Too many had whispered about the late nights and unexplained perks. HR didn't fire her outright, but they placed her on indefinite unpaid leave. For someone like Vanessa, who thrived on appearances, status, and being the successful one, it was worse than being fired. She had to walk around with her reputation rotting while pretending everything was fine. Her parents had washed their hands of her. I knew this because her father called me again, not to apologize this time, but to warn me. "She's desperate, Nate. She's been calling us non-stop, begging for money, blaming you for everything." We told her no. She's furious. I thanked him and hung up, more certain than ever that I had made the right choice by mailing that envelope to them. Then came the legal trouble. Sandra, Trevor's wife, didn't just confront him at home. She filed for divorce, and in her petition, she included Vanessa by name. The lawsuit wasn't aimed at Vanessa directly, but the collateral damage was unavoidable. Word spread quickly in their community, and soon Vanessa wasn't just a disgraced employee, she was branded a homewrecker. Invitations stopped arriving, friends cut her off, and the ones who stuck around only did so to watch her collapse up close. I kept my distance. I didn't respond to her emails or her midnight voicemails, even the ones that dripped with venom. She accused me of ruining her life, of plotting against her, of conspiring with Trevor's wife to destroy her. The irony was, I hadn't needed to do anything elaborate. All I did was shine a light on the shadows she created. She was the one who had stacked her life like a tower of cards. All I did was remove the bottom one. But Vanessa wasn't going to accept that. One Saturday afternoon, I returned to the hotel and found her waiting outside again. This time, she looked worse than before. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair greasy, her eyes bloodshot. She didn't storm or shout. She just followed me inside, slumping into a chair like she belonged there. "You ruined me," she said quietly, almost too softly. I sat on the edge of the bed, keeping my distance. "You ruined yourself." Her head snapped up, and for a second, I saw the old fire. "No, you set me up. You made me look like a monster. You did that all on your own." She glared at me, then pulled out her phone and slammed it on the table. "I still have messages, Nate. I can twist them. I can make people believe you were abusive. You think you're free? You're not. I'll drag you down with me." Her words should have scared me, but instead, I almost pitied her. She still didn't get it. She thought control was about having dirt, about manipulating perceptions. She didn't understand that once someone stops caring about appearances, they can't be blackmailed. "Do what you want," I told her. "But if you send those messages, I'll release everything I've got. Every document, every photo, every detail of what you did. And unlike you, I don't need to twist anything. The truth is enough." For the first time, she hesitated. Her eyes flickered, searching my face for weakness, for the old Nate who would back down. He wasn't there. She left without another word, slamming the door again, but it didn't rattle me this time. It sounded more like a nail in the coffin. Days later, I heard through the grapevine that she had finally been evicted from our old apartment. She hadn't been paying rent. The money she had siphoned away was gone, probably blown on keeping up appearances or trying to impress Trevor. Now, she was couch hopping, relying on scraps of sympathy from people who were already tired of her drama. The final confrontation came weeks later, at a coffee shop of all places. I had gone in for a quiet afternoon, and there she was, sitting in the corner. When she spotted me, she stood, straightened her jacket, and walked over like she still owned the room. But the eyes around us told a different story. People stared, whispered. They knew. She leaned across the table, her voice low but sharp. "You could have just left quietly. You didn't have to burn everything down." I looked at her calmly. "I didn't burn anything. I just let people see the fire you set yourself." Her jaw tightened, but for the first time since I'd known her, she didn't have a comeback. She just stood there, silent, before turning and walking out. No smirk, no arrogance, just silence. That was the last time I saw Vanessa in person. Months later, I heard she was working a low-paying retail job in another city, far from the polished corporate career she once bragged about. Her parents had stopped mentioning her entirely. Friends who once flocked to her for parties and favors erased her from their feeds. She had become invisible. As for me, I moved into a new place, reconnected with friends she had pushed away, and started living without the constant weight of her control. I didn't celebrate loudly, and I didn't boast. Revenge didn't come with fireworks or applause. It came quietly, in the knowledge that I had walked away intact while she was left with nothing but the ruins she created. The memory of that night, the smirk on her face when she told me I'd never leave, that I needed her too much, still lingers sometimes. But when it does, I think of the expression she wore when she opened that envelope on the kitchen table. The shift from arrogance to panic, from control to collapse. That expression was worth every second of silence, every careful step, every nod I gave her while I planned. Because in the end, Vanessa was right about one thing. I didn't need her. I needed her to underestimate me. I needed her to believe I was too weak, too dependent, too small to fight back. That belief was the rope she wrapped around her own neck. And when she finally smirked and said, "You'll never leave me," she couldn't have been more wrong. I left her behind, and she never recovered. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.